Here.
Mr. Key,
Here.
Mr. Pullen, Mr. Rittenhouse.
Here. Great, we're on to adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we adopt the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Ms. Johnson, are you good? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. I heard four, so 4-0, one absent. We're now on to our only round of public comments. So this is the time where we invite the public, including those who are residents of Fluvanna County, our staff, have students in our building, or a business in front of this board to come forth and speak for up to 3 minutes. We ask that you don't address any particular board members and that we treat one another with respect. Is there anyone who'd like to come forth and be heard? Hearing and seeing none, I will close our public comments. Here are the reports. So specifically, we have budget closeout discussion and carryover request. If actually folks will indulge me for a moment before we get into reports, I believe Dr. Gretz, you had something you wanted to address that you sent via email. Did you want to discuss that today, or did you want to leave that for either offline conversation and or discussion next?
I think I would really defer to the board on whether or not you want to talk about that today.
Board members, is anybody inclined to have a brief discussion as it relates to the committee to review books and libraries?
I prefer to stick to budget today.
Okay, great, then we'll address that we'll discuss that in the November meeting and or via email. Just make sure that you don't copy any more than one other board member when replying back, because that constitutes a digital meeting.
I'm gonna make a comment about that, James. Referring about the committee to review the books. I don't want this to fall by the wayside. I did text that to you, I see it in the news and it is important. It's many people that these books are inappropriate for certain age groups and they need to be addressed. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks for your comment. We are on to budget closeout discussion and carryover request. Ms. Gillum.
Really gonna defer to Dr. Gretz.
Yeah, so in the last meeting, excuse me, in the last meeting, the board voted to approve asking for carryover in the amount of $500,000 to cover the cost, the estimated cost of bathroom renovations in Central Elementary. I wanted to bring up another item for you to consider. And I wasn't able to do this in the last meeting because I didn't have the information. One of the things that we have been discussing with Mr. Dahl has been just how to position our planning and anticipating the impact of housing, current and future housing on our facilities, capacity, enrollment. One of the things that communities do, that localities do, I've been a part of this in other localities, is to hire a firm that will come in and do what's called a student potential analysis. And I can't give you the background on what the calculations are, but they have several, they have several variables that they use in a 10-year look back period to be able to bring you an estimate of what to expect in terms of future growth in your schools. And so Mr. Dahl and I have been talking about, we finally got an estimate back from one of these companies. It usually costs between $25,000 and $30,000 to have it done. It really is something that would be very helpful if we had done it probably a little bit before. Now that the housing is started, there's really an acute need, I believe, and he believes, I think he's right, for us to have some idea of what to expect in terms of enrollment and growth and projections. So I'd like the board to consider adding that as an item for the supervisors to consider funding out of turn back. it's a relatively small amount when you consider the whole amount, but, it's an appropriate place, I think, when you come. It's something that benefits both the county and the schools. And again, I didn't have the information and literally was able to get it in hand and talk with Mr. Dahl the day after your last board meeting. Otherwise, I would have done this. So if you may have questions. Ms. Gillum spent a long time talking with the firm. We might be able to answer questions about the specifics and the details of it. I would just ask for your feedback on that. And then the next step, I think, would be for you to have a proposal in hand and for you to be able to consider that and pass it on to the supervisors. I do want you to understand that Mr. Dahl is supportive of this as well.
So one thing to think about is the timeline. So the Board of Supervisors met yesterday. That is their third Wednesday of the month meeting. I don't believe that I believe their next meeting will be the first week of November. We meet the second. They meet again on the third week of November. And the functional question is feedback on that by the third week of November too late for them to fix and or consider that carryover request, or are we reasonably in the clear there?
They ask us to have carryover request for them by November 3rd. If we do something different than that, I have to ask for an extension.
So that means that it can't wait till our next board meeting. So my understanding and the premise, and I've been privy to the conversations with the chair of the supervisors, Moselle Booker and Eric Dahl, as it relates to student population and density in our schools. And the functional question in all of this is, how many kids are we gonna have in the next 3 or 5 years? Like, not to be hyperbolic, but like, I'm not confident we won't have trailers in some of the elementary schools soon, just based on the new housing that has, Pete's in a new neighborhood that I guess we've already seen those kids come in, but that's part of our increase in population in some places. We got 400 homes, so my guess is that going in around Colonial Circle, so my guess is that we'll have somewhere between 400 and 600 new students from there. And of course, the question about what grade level are they going to be in, and all of that just depends on who moves in and how. But when you're talking about relatively cheaper housing than other places, to some extent in apartments and row houses, you're going to expect younger families and starter homes. And so my guess is that we're going to get some population there, but to have a professional tell us how many and what grade levels, or if they can estimate that, are pretty critically important, in addition to just like understanding the census and whether or not we just have organic growth from existing residents. So given all the timeline, and even though I've advocated for the central bathroom renovation as is appropriate based on our last vote, I'm inclined to have as much discussion as the board needs in order to be able to take an action today on this.
Mr. Gretz, I have a question. Do you know the average daily attendance as it stands right now?
3318.
Well, that's 300 or 400 less than it was in 2012. So that being the case, we're still not up to where we were 11 years ago.
I think that's true.
3 or 4, 5 years from now, what will the enrollment be? Will people still be going to public schools, or will they be going to private schools to get the education instead of social issues that they're getting in public schools? That's just a
I think
question.
I can answer that.
Yep, who can?
One of the issues
I mean,
we
that's a
have is
professional.
at middle and high school, we have additional capacity because of the way their structure is, their schedule is set up. Because you have teachers with 90-minute planning periods, so you could have a class held in that classroom while that teacher's planning. Which isn't ideal, but you can do that both at the middle school and high school. You don't have that same option at elementary. And so where the issue lies is the capacity of the elementary buildings is less than the capacity of the middle and high school. And that's kind of where the concern is. And you're right, we don't have the enrollment that we had before, but we also had a ton of trailers then too. And my guess is where we would have to have trailers would be at Central and Carysbrook, because we just don't have the capacity there for much growth. But it all depends on where, the ages of the kids that come in and how many kids come
I guess we have a preliminary cost, how much a study like that? would be?
It depends on the size of the project, but typically they run 25 to 30,000.
And what was the estimate that you got from the vendor, when you got that email back? With,
25 to 30. That's what I'm providing you.
Yeah.
These, typically, these are helpful on a couple of different fronts. One is when you're trying to, when you're reaching the point that you're thinking you might need to build a new school. And these can help you see not only how much growth, but where the growth is, to try to figure out where do we want to put a school. I think that's less of our conversation and more about just how many kids to expect in the future and at what ages.
I think since it's a direct result of actions of the Board of Supervisors, it makes perfect sense to ask for the money to pay for this information.
And I think planning for the future is also key.
yeah, I'll note that a lot of, I'm not advocating for or against growth. I functionally believe in smart growth, but that's not this board's job. Some of those divisions are by right, and so some of that's just about how the land is ultimately labeled. And whether or not it should have been, A1 versus R1 versus A4 is not for this board either. But knowing being able to predict how many students are going to be in the buildings and how we might need to shift grades, because we're really locked in the elementary levels. There's just no flex. So I'm inclined to ask them to fund it so that we have our eyes open as we see increasing numbers in the elementary levels. Given that's the case, and because we can make motions as necessary, I'm gonna make the motion that we, in addition to asking the Board of Supervisors for $500,000 to offset the cost of this Carysbrook Elementary or Central Elementary bathrooms, which is already on the CIP, that we additionally ask the Board of Supervisors to consider dedicating $30,000 of carryover funds to fund a population study to predict student enrollment in the future. Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion?
I just ask a point of clarification.
Please.
So your projected carryover balance is
It's 518.
So are you suggesting that the population study be funded at a rate of 30,000 and the remaining funds be allocated to the bathrooms?
I'm fine with that friendly amendment that we can only we fund the 30,000 and then the remainder to the Central Elementary. Ultimately, I feel both of these things need to happen, and I'm sure the county will figure out the right ways to fund them. But yes is the answer. So we're returning what, 518-ish?
Yes.
So the amendment, assuming that my second will agree, is for us to ask them to fund the $30,000 for the population study, and the remainder of the carryover balance to go to Central Elementary.
I agree.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No,
So we have amended the carryover study. Of the carryover request. I'll personally note that not having that information doesn't make us any more prepared for what ultimately happens. So we're on to budget closeout. Oh, no, we just did carryover, so I think we're on to fiscal year 24.
So I just put in your packet the salary study that we did for when we built the 24 budget. I will tell you that that what I'm hoping to get today is some direction in terms of what you'd like to do for salary for, the coming year, because that is the biggest part of our budget. One of the issues that we're definitely seeing that I think we'll have to factor in as we build 25 is the cost of substitute teachers. We are, last month, we spent $60,000 in sub costs. That included bus drivers, but also, classroom subs.
How does that compare to historical data?
I'd have to go back and look how it is, compared with previous, Octobers. Subs are a month behind, so October payroll pays September subs.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at all of that, but our payroll right now was running, the October payroll was running close to $3.6 million. And last year we were running payrolls around 3.2, so the payrolls are quite a bit higher this year. There's not a difference in staffing. We actually have 288 teachers right now with 7 vacancies. We had 295 last year, so it's like the exact same number of staff. It's just the difference in the compensation package that's kind of driving that. And we've talked before about it's just a different world now in terms of people take their leave. They take their sick days. We have people that take leave without pay.
Quite a bit about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of it.
A big change.
Which with leave without pay, you're not paying the teacher, or the employee, but you're paying the sub, so it's kind of an offset, but when, when they have leave and they're using it, then you're paying them and the sub, so it's a little bit different.
How many teachers do we have now? I'm sorry.
288,
Thank you.
288 with 7 vacancies. And some of those vacancies, I don't think that we'll be able to fill. We've tried to be creative in a couple of situations, and may look at some mid-year hires for things. But I just don't know that we'll be able to fill them. And we have vacancies, not only as teachers and instructional assistants, but also in the area where we're seeing turnover. I don't know if you want to just start looking at one of the things I do want to say about 24, sorry, a little bit. For 24, we did get the calc tool. I analyzed that yesterday. It's looking like we are getting the $1.1 million for the all-in. But if you exclude that from the template, it's $50,000 shorter than it was in the governor's budget. And that is using that 3330 enrollment number, which right now we're running about 3318. So the state allocation will end up being impacted by that enrollment should it not pick up. And I wouldn't think that it would change much in terms of increasing enrollment during that period of time. And it's not like it's coming from one place. If I lay the 2 templates next to each other, it's a little bit from here and a little bit from there. So it's just a kind of a shifting of funds. But obviously with the all-in money, we do have a 1.1 million out of those funds.
Gotcha. So when will we need to, so assuming this template is actually what we're ultimately going to get from the state, when do we need to ask for an adjustment to our budget with the county?
Well, that's actually already gone to the county.
Okay.
We did a supplemental for the all-in,
Mhm.
and we've also done supplementals for the non-book period. Yeah, they
Okay,
were
just making sure that we're all tied up,
Yeah.
that everything is like
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
so this is our final number.
Yes, well, yes, this is the number that we're budgeted off of. They will make an adjustment to the final calculation based on enrollment.
Yeah.
And they won't do that until after we do our March 31 count.
Mhm.
Which I always I used to have a superintendent in February, they would ask me what the March 31 count is, and I'd be like, I could tell you on March 31. So but what we typically don't see is a lot of pickup in enrollment from here. We'll have some transition in January, but we'll also have transition out. So I don't anticipate that you're gonna see much change in enrollment.
I mean, I guess it depends how effective our, truancy and attendance staff can be, and
Yeah, and that is the other issue is if you have dropouts, those impact enrollment. I do know that we have quite a few students that are asking to graduate in December. Which is, Dr. Kretz and I were talking about that yesterday. It's really been more of a factor of COVID where we've seen those requests increase.
Mhm.
In the past, we would have maybe 2 or 3, and I think we have about 20 right now.
wow.
So it's a difference, and we do try to counsel those students about taking advantage of that. The free education that they have available to them through dual enrollment classes and career and tech ed classes and those things. But, for various reasons, students decide that they would like to go ahead and leave in January.
Do we have given a number, do we hold any sort of ceremony at the half year, or do they march in the spring?
Yeah, they march in the spring. We do allow them to come back for graduation. Too.
So what, obviously we got this 1.1 million and we've, Ms. Soares led us through some of the thinking as it relates to how to dedicate funds, and obviously we got some work to do on the curriculum as it relates to literacy. What do you all need from us in order to start acting as it relates to attendance? There's, what is it, 10 or 20% dedicated to focus on attendance? Do we anticipate advertising for positions in the near term?
Yeah, I believe that
We're
positions
already
already
advertised.
posted have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There have been positions posted, and then we are gonna discuss trying to get our intent forms out a little earlier this year so that we can be ahead of the curve for going into next year.
And are we going to model our procedures or policies or the way that we ultimately use as staff on something like Louisa or other divisions? Like, how do we effectively use this to get back some of the students who are not in our buildings and not getting education elsewhere?
So we'll draw information from programs like the one we saw in Louisa, but we didn't get anywhere near enough money to replicate what's going on in Louisa. They're spending $340,000 just on the staffing alone without the Saturday program. So
Yeah.
with our roughly about 110,000.
Uh-huh.
So we can take elements of that. What we've decided to do is to pursue people.
Mhm.
The job it will be to make the phone calls, make the home visits, and really try to strengthen relationships with those families and get those kids in school. In some cases, maybe driving to the home to pick them up. We're already doing that. We don't have a lot of staff to do it. Certainly don't have full-time people dedicated. With the amount of money, $110,000, pretty sure we're about 100.
Yeah.
That's about 4 instructional assistant level positions.
And how long is that funding for? These are positions that are
It
gonna be,
goes through fiscal 26.
okay. So I got a couple years of lead.
Mr. Gretz,
Yes.
I have a comment about that, about this Saturday, trying to get kids to school. If you can't get them during the week, how you gonna get them on the weekend?
We won't be able to because we can't afford Saturday school.
Yeah,
That would be a question for Louisa, who's doing that. Not sure how they get. I wish we could tackle that problem, but we won't be able to afford it.
Alrighty. What else as it relates to 24?
I can't think of anything else. Unless you have questions or issues you'd like to discuss. We wanted to remind you with the salary study of where we were last year, and I won't, unless you'd like me to, I won't belabor the entire history of it. We started with a large number of divisions. The board asked us to cull that down to 5, including Fluvanna. And so we did our study and were able to classify rankings for each of our positions in the fiscal year.
Could you open that up? Salaries. If you go down to one of the tabs. So when you're looking at this.
You make that wider so that the chart itself is across the space.
This one is, this is admin assistants.
Mhm.
And you'll remember that what we were trying to, we capped everybody at 13%. So there was nothing more than 13%, except for on the teacher scale, because we had some of the steps that were higher and what we were trying to do there. So there are some teachers that got more than 13%. But when you look at these, you know, so when we did the cap, that didn't necessarily bring those people up to 3 out of 5 or even the midpoint. In some cases, even with the cap, they're below, they're still below us. And so I guess one of my questions for the board is, do you want me to go back and figure out with new scales where these people are at that time, and do we want to continue to make adjustments to those? So where we're gonna have issues is admin assistants, I believe, if you could page through a little bit, Mr. Gifford. Like this one is the bus drivers, they weren't the lowest, but certainly we could continue to look at that. But when you get to some of the other like custodians there, the 12-month custodians, and one thing I'll point out is that we moved all, I think we have, actually, I think we have no 10-month custodians anymore. Maybe one,
I believe there's more.
because we gave them the option if they didn't want to go to 12-month, but almost all of them ended up going 12-month, and then I think we had a resignation or two that then resulted. So they're all 12-month now. Except for maybe that one. But those salaries are still very low, even though those people have received, I think they got a 7% the previous year, and they got a cap of 13 this past year.
Can you remind me, what is do we have a state projected average employee increase as a part of the last year? Is it a new number?
There'll be a new biennium. BAS, based on the JLARC study that was just done, is recommending as that one of their legislative priorities an 8% over the biennium. Now, whether that language will be 4 and 4, as it has been sometimes in the past, or 2 and 6, or any combination of those. I thought it was 5, Ms. Gillen, but I
Yeah, I saw what you said this morning. So
You thought it
actually,
was 5
That's as
over
much as
the
we-
biennium
yeah.
or 5 for the next year?
5 for the next year is what we kind of heard, but then when we saw something in writing, it was the
So it's
8% or the
biennium.
biennium, which I would probably run a 4 and 4 scenario with that.
So, yeah, so what I'm seeing here in the totality of this is, a handful of low wage job functions, so administrative assistants, bus drivers, custodians, and IAs. Teachers are here as well, although they're less, they're not quite as behind as other job functions. And then we have our APs, directors, supervisors, EAs, directors. So I guess just about everything's here. I do think that we should be looking at, assuming we're gonna do 8 over the biennium, we should be looking at 4 and then see what it would cost to move a couple of job functions to 7 as targeted. Is my best guess, to 7 for the year as a targeted way to try to keep fixing long-term inequities that we can't do all at once. Like our numbers are atrocious for our principals, for instance, and it's gonna keep us from being able to hire talented staff and keep the ones we have.
And the other thing to keep in mind, I know you're aware of this, but when we did our study, we used all the existing data. Nobody had finished a budget, including us. So it'll be important, I think, for us to be able to see what people actually did with their salaries last year versus what we did, and see how we stack up again.
And
Yeah,
I don't know that we know that there are some divisions across the state that are doing mid-year raises because of, they thought it was gonna be a certain percent, they ballparked on that, and then it ended up being higher. So, but I don't think any of these divisions are ones that are doing mid-years. I think they did their compensation,
I think you're right, but I can't say I know
Yeah.
about Goochland and Charlottesville.
Yeah.
I know the others are, but
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. But we.
So anyway, we'll have to bear that in mind too, but we'll go ahead and start gathering, scales again. The other thing, that I know, we talked about yesterday that we're gonna have to revisit is the stipends for, our activities. Staff continue to have concerns relative to that. And I think what our plan is at this point is that we pull together, people that participate in those to be part of a committee that might make recommendations relative to stipends.
And just an added, what we'd like to do is to bring you a structure that has several scales for the coaching and extracurricular positions. Each one of those derivative of the beginning teacher salary scale. So for example, scale A might be 4% of the first step, which might be, please don't hold me these numbers, $1,500. I don't know. And build 10 to 12 of those. And then the next step would be to figure out what of our which coaching positions go where. And then how many assistant coaches, or how many coaches, I should say, for each program, or sponsors for each program we should fund. And we need to involve the people in those programs, the teachers and the coaches and the sponsors, to help us model that. Ms. Gilman and I can't just in isolation decide how many coaches should be a part of the academic team, anything like that. And then bring you that. And you can see the cost of migrating our people to that structure, and then we can go from there.
so yes, and to both of those, I'd like to, if we had the capacity and the staff time to ultimately update where we are versus other divisions by job function, so that we can ultimately, and I'd calculate, what it'll cost to do a 4%, which we think is the state minimum / average. And if we can calculate by job function for all job functions, like what would it cost to do 7? And then we can kind of swap in and swap out based on our prioritization of which job functions. 2, I definitely want to see a complete, like a new paradigm and or proposal as it relates to stipends and the like functional cost of that. And I'm inclined to give Dr. Getz the longest leash possible to have those conversations and figure out what he thinks is an equitable solution. And then I'd also like to see something that is sustainable, where I think stipends should functionally be attached to the increasing teacher salaries. So like percentage wise, so that we don't get in a position where they don't move again for 10 years.
One of the things that I think is an issue with our current stipend plan is that it makes no difference. I'll use volleyball as an example. If you're the first year volleyball coach or the 10th year, if it's your 10th year coach in volleyball, you get paid the same amount of money. And so there's no, for longevity, there's no
Incentive.
benefit to that or incentive. But the other thing that right now, the coaches can decide, we have this pot of money and I can divide it up again, 4 people or 6 people, and the coach makes that decision with the athletic director. With this particular model, when we're talking about doing it in this way, I think we would have to dictate, this is how many coaches we can fund for this sport, because those assistants would also be on that same percentage. So it's just a lot of moving parts.
It really is. It's a lot of, and it. You always want to try to build something like this when you're making a transition. If you think it makes sense to migrate people to it in a way that they either get an increase or at least stay the same. We don't want people to to get a decrease in the new one. And it's just with all these moving parts and with that dynamic she just mentioned.
Yeah, isn't that inevitable? Like, if a coach right now, if we ultimately find that a sport should have two coaches, and right now the head coach is dividing it up into six, and everybody's getting, you know, a couple $100 or something. Ultimately, a handful of coaches, if they continue to volunteer, will go from a couple $100 to zero based on that.
That's one possibility. The other is that the good thing about what we do is it gives coaches a lot of autonomy.
Mhm.
And they can leverage relationships. If I coach volleyball and I've got a brother-in-law who wants to help me and he's willing to just do it for free, then I've got that much more money to hire more coaches. Yeah. The problem with it is people on the outside looking at that don't have any of that information, view that as inequity. They don't know that dynamic is at work with those coaches. They don't realize that they get the same amount of money and can spend it how they want to. They just see that this sport has 6 coaches and they make $500 a piece. And this sport has 8. And the assumption is we as a division are discriminating against the one that only has 6. Or discriminating against the one who has their brother-in-law coaching for free and doesn't realize that, just says they're not even paying their coaches. So I think that's one thing that we have to correct. And when you do correct that, 2 things are going to happen. If this division, if we decide, we bring you a recommendation and you agree with it, and it's based on our comparative analysis that a school our size should support this many head coaches and this many assistant coaches for, say, JV basketball.
Hmm.
Our current model, because it has so much flexibility, may or may not be employing that. And so if we say we're going to support X number and they got more than that, then that means some of them are not going to be coaches next year. So,
Or would be volunteer coaches, assuming that we allow them to continue to volunteer and have
I think
a
a lot of
title without pay.
potential, and I'm giving you what could be the problems. I mean, I think there are a lot of great things that could happen from this too. One being what Ms. Gilmore said is that, you know, if I've been coaching, if I've been doing the one act play or whatever it is for 15 years, I should probably be compensated more than somebody who's doing it for their first year. That makes sense, and it's predictable. And I think it's much more clear. Right now, it's not clear. It's if I move to Savannah and I want to help coach a sport, I really don't have any idea how many coaches you employ or what you pay them. It's very much subjective. It's up to whoever is the head coach. We know how much money we give that head coach. You approve that. But then, so I think it's much more clear, and it gives us the ability to be much more transparent. We put that schedule together, and it's clear how many we're funding. It's clear what they're being paid, and we put that public facing on the web, and anybody can see it at any time. So I think it is positive, but there are a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of potentially difficult discussions to have with people. It's change. Now, ironically, I do want to remind you, if that's what we go with, it is change going back to what Flavanna had before some budget reduction. Do think it'd be an improvement, and it would be returning to what Flavanna had, but it will be different. I think it'll be improvement for most. All right, comment.
Do you have any unique perspective on this, Andre, given your experience coaching?
No, I think it's a good idea to have a scale. We're trying to go far as we're trying to recruit and retain talented coaches to know, you know, what the market is and how much you can make. Because I volunteer, because I'm on the school board now, I'm a volunteer coach, and one positive volunteering is that you get a chance to coach and you kind of get in line when a vacancy come about. So I think a lot of coaches that volunteer, they don't really do it for the money, do it for the experience and to you know, get an opportunity to become, you know, a full-time coach.
Okay, so.
I appreciate that, like genuinely, like, I think hearing from coaches and those who ultimately like are affected by this is really important. That's why I support having you be able to socialize and have open conversations about it. And I hope that staff and coaches and community members, as we talk about this, realize that like Dr. Getz will be getting feedback and that nothing becomes policy until this board ultimately votes for it. So these are important and earnest conversations that have to happen in order for us to be informed. And so if staff members, coaches, others feel like something that's being proposed or talked about it isn't fair or equitable, I hope that you'll feel comfortable voicing it to Scott and to Dr. Gretz. And if you want to talk to a board member about it, all of our emails and phone numbers are available on the website. And so I think the best thing that we can do is one, assume best intents, and then two, keep the communication open.
So you want me to run a scenario with 4% and a scenario with 7% and update the salary study information, and I will continue to use these counties. Because before we did a larger.
I think this is the right competitive
This
set.
is manageable for me.
And I recognize both Mr. Fairchild's point as it relates to other divisions. I still fundamentally believe this is our functional competitive set. Yeah, and for clarification, at least, and we haven't heard from other board members yet per se, but running it as 4, assuming that's going to be our like state minimum, updating the numbers and then seeing what 7% would do by comparison for each of the job functions. That's not saying that right now we have a couple job functions. I'm not going to name names that I don't think that need as much correction or any correction by comparison, because I think that we've done a good job in fixing them. But it would be nice, at least for me, to be able to see this is what's going to cost for 4, and that's our like base level. And this is the additional cost if we want to increase a 4 to a 7%, and we can divide by 3 or something if we wanted to know what 1% would be. And then we can play with do we want to prioritize particular functions? If so, which, and can move it kind of in and out in a flexible way.
Any other-
Other board members have thoughts and or I want to make sure that whatever we provide as guidance is ultimately a consensus among the board.
I'm in favor of that as a starting point.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. This is like we did last year, just to see where we at and what the salary is.
Charles?
Me also, 4 versus 7, good comparison to start with.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So that does staff salaries and the assumptions. That looks at, we've also talked about stipends. I think that,
Open up to 25. I've got some information here,
Mhm.
basically the starting point that where we went last year. So we've kind of, they've updated per pupil. This is always a year behind, so this is 22. And you know, when I do that projection, I just take your total budget and divide it by the number of students. Obviously, you don't spend your total budget, or if there are some expenses that aren't applied to per pupil. But that's my projection for where we would be. But that 23 number is our real number from our annual school report. So that our number for 23 is what our number is in terms of the per pupil expenditure. And then the state average for, I have it down there at the bottom, sorry, that's why I don't like not being able to drive. The state average for 22 was 15,541. And then I reran, you can go to the next slide, when I reran the per pupil expenditures for 22. Looking again at those different pots of money and the per pupil expenditures, I will let you know that we dropped a spot in 22. I think Madison was behind us before, and now they're ahead of us. But I think a large portion of that, when I look at that, is because they got a lot of federal money. And so that's kind of why they moved up on that graph beyond us. And I do think it's interesting when you look at that, the amount of federal money that we receive compared with some of our neighbors.
And that's based on need.
A lot of it's based on need, yeah, and it's census and need. I mean, some of those divisions are larger than us, but, certainly, and we know that we're running around 40% free reduced lunch. It's somewhere in
Just
that.
under, or-
Yeah.
Yeah, 39 as a
Yeah.
division or something.
So, I mean, what that tells me is other divisions are running at that rate or higher as well. We were told that the state is not gonna make a mid-year adjustment on the free reduced lunch, the CEP program. And so hopefully they're going to do that next year, which was the indication that we got. So that will help in terms of, the school lunch debt that we've been responsible for the last couple of years.
Right.
Which is climbing
Yes.
increment.
Right, and for clarification for folks at home, all of this functionally means there is a good chance that every student in Fluvanna County will have access to free breakfast and lunch next school year. All of that just pending state review and all of that, but,
Yes, as long as those targets aren't moved, which, always concerns me when I look at something like this and I see that other school divisions are obviously seeing a greater need. Then it does concern me. Are they then gonna change what the playing field looks like? And I don't know that.
No.
I was a little bit surprised that the state didn't do something. In August,
I
to
am
be honest.
also shocked that they, would decide it's too difficult to do in the middle of the year and take the easy way out instead of putting students first.
And then this is the enrollment numbers that we talked about earlier. Right, I had projected 3330. We are running about 3318 right now. And last year we ended up running over the projection, but anytime you run over the projection, you are given the funds based on the actual number, not the projection. So really, I just use that as a budgeting tool. And we've already talked a little bit about this, but just to refresh, in 23, we did the 5%, for most of the positions, or the higher of the two, give on the step, and then we did a 7%, for IAs, nurses, custodians, and administrative assistants. And we had a 15% increase for bus drivers. I will say, we're pretty much fully staffed on bus drivers, whereas our neighbors are not. And I do think it's because of this and the fact that we provide benefits to our drivers.
And also, I've been hearing a lot of positive feedback from the activity bus drivers about, $20 an hour that they really appreciate that.
And we'd be remiss not to mention the fact that we have remarkable staff in the transportation department, and that Ms. Marsh sets a bar and a culture that makes people want to stay. Money is great, culture is great, but when the two work together, that's ultimately what we get.
And this is fiscal 23, so
Yeah,
this is not what we're living now, so we did for
Mhm.
last year.
And then we combined the two scales together, so we have one teacher scale now, and then we held staff harmless on health insurance, and we absorbed the premium increase in our budget. And then for 24, we did the salary study that we did, the comparison data. All staff got a minimum of a step or 7%, whichever was higher of the two, 13% cap on salary increases, except for teachers, and that was due to the scale and trying to get the scale aligned with our neighbors. And then this is a breakdown of what those average increases were for each of those scales. One of the things that I am going to recommend at this point is, we did a couple of years ago, we did a specialty ban for school psychs and speech pathologists. When we made adjustments to the teacher scale, it actually benefited the speech pathologist to be on the teacher scale and not on that ban. We gave them the benefit of the doubt and put them on the teacher scale. But my recommendation would be that we eliminate that ban and leave them on the teacher scale. Because it was not the intent to undercompensate them. And we do have, I think, 3 people in those positions right now, 3 or 4.
that are on the teacher scale now, so we have a band that's not being employed.
Yes, and then we don't have any school psychs on staff right now, so we're not using that either.
That's fundamentally its own problem.
Well, we're doing that through a contract with an outside agency. And I think people are fairly pleased with how that's going. Obviously, we'd rather have people, face to face, but it seems to be working what we're doing right now. That is a population of people that can work virtually and they choose to do that. So that's one of the other barriers that we have. We did hold staff harmless on health insurance and we absorbed the increase. And I want to talk a little bit about health insurance. So we put out an RFP last week. It's not in there. We put out an RFP last week and we originally had a due date of next Friday. And we got a couple of calls from a couple of vendors asking if we could extend it to November 2nd. So we're going to do that because I talked to our consultant this morning. He was concerned that if we didn't do that, that we might not get all the bids that we want. Because he had a couple of big names that contacted him. So we are going to move it to November 2nd. He's assured me that we'll have information for your November 8th meeting. So that we can at least have a preliminary discussion about that. And then my plan is that we would bring you in for individual conferences or groups of 2 to talk with the consultant and look at all of the proposals in greater detail, because we do have to make a decision by December at your December meeting, because we're under contract. If we don't do anything in December, we would continue with Jefferson Health. If we want to make a change, we have to notify them by the end of December that we're making a change. And just a little bit related to that, it has gotten to be kind of a complicated story. Dr. Gretz and I had some real concerns relative to BPA, who are the TPA, or the plan administrators for the program. Jefferson Health is the one that manages basically they manage the funds, they solicit the rate, they determine what the rates are, they solicit the reinsurance, all of those pieces. And under the program with Jefferson Health, we are able to get, they use all of the groups that they provide insurance to get that reinsurance quote, which has really helped us because we don't have any lasers. We have the 125 max and that's it. And we don't have any lasers. And so
Can you just make sure everybody listening knows what you mean by lasers?
and laser would be if you had a high cost claimant one year and they knew that that person was like say it's a cancer person and they're more likely to have treatment the following year or some kind of recurrence, then the insurance company can apply a laser to that and say that you have to pay that person's claims at a rate of 300,000 instead of 125. And in the first years of doing the self-insurance model, we had some of those, and those were pretty big issues for us. So we don't have those anymore. We do have the 125, but I will tell you, I think we had somewhere between 8 and 10 people that hit the 125. And if any of you have been to the doctor or had surgery, you know, that's not real hard to do these days. So it is good that we have that part in place, and that's really because of the large group that Jefferson Health manages. They are out of Ohio and they manage a large group. BPA is the one that processes the claims. And so they're the ones that your doctor's office submits a claim, they make the payment for the claim, they get the funds from Jefferson Health to pay it, but they're the ones that are processing the claims. We had some concerns relative to how that was being done. Some issues had come up kind of periodically throughout the last few years. And so we made a determination that we were not going to continue with BPA. Unbeknownst to us, the day after we sent the letter, we were notified that BPA has merged with WellNet out of Philadelphia. And so WellNet's going to be taking over BPA. We've had a lot of conversations with Jefferson Health over the last couple of weeks. They have told me that we can select whatever TPA we want. We don't have to have WellNet. We can do anybody that we want to. That's totally up to us. And so it could be any provider, any TPA, that we could still run our self-insurance through them. I do have a meeting with them tomorrow I think they want to talk to me relative to my, feelings on some of the TPA pieces to that. I do think it, and if your consultant agrees that it benefits us to continue to be self-insured because we retain those funds if we have a good year. We're not in a position where we might get a giant rate increase one year and then the next year go down and this kind of back and forth. I call it car salesman stuff that used to happen with our previous providers where they would come in, this time of year and go, well, you're probably gonna have a 20% increase. And then they'd come back and go, well, we can cut it to 15 and, oh, we'll cut you a deal and we'll make it 10. I hate stuff like that. Like, I just need to know, like, how much is it? And when you're self-insured, it's totally based on what your claims are. Your premiums are determined by your claims. And you need to have enough money in your claim bucket to cover your claims. And if you do, if you have more, then you keep that money. If you have less, then you have to fund it at a greater level the next year. So I do think that, and I'm told that over time, you can save up to 15% just doing that, a self-insurance model. I think the issues are who's providing that for us and is that program able to meet our needs? And that was our concern at the time. Did I summarize that?
I think that's pretty well said. I mean, you technically have a decision about whether or not you want to stay self-funded. We both candidly hope that that's not an issue. It is, I think when you begin, I wasn't here when you began that, but I think there's a little bit of a gamble here. Yeah, it's a little bit like being in a high deductible health plan. But because of the decision, frankly, because Ms. Gillen has a lot of acumen in this. And you guys have made great decisions over the past few years to be in a very healthy spot to be self-funded. So I think that, but that is technically a decision the board can make. The other is, which insurance provider do you want? We have a bid out, a solicitation out. And if you remember, we went through this years, was it last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, we went out to bid. And the dynamic that we're all seeing, I have lived this in other divisions, so I'll just say first person I have seen, and my neighbors have seen, is that it's a very, the sharks are in the water with the insurance companies. It's very competitive, they're very aggressive. And if they can grab your business the first year, they will. They know, I'm not vilifying them, but they do know it is a real burden on your employees to switch insurance companies. The burden of learning the new benefits, the burden of getting the new pharmacy cards and all that. I mean, it is very hard on employees. And I think insurance companies sometimes might leverage that to give you a low bid. And then you do that migration and you go through all those burn payments. And then the next year, based on your claims, you get a double-digit increase and it's not sustainable. And a lot of divisions jump into that water hoping for something better. And they get in this endless cycle of flipping that switch every 2 to 3 years. And their employees are miserable, benefits never make sense. So I think that's something, I'm saying all that because we believed that the local choice would potentially do that. Now they really didn't. They gave you a bid that was like barely under BPA, as I recall. But what we asked them for was essentially simplify it, some kind of guarantee that there wouldn't be any more than this much increase over the next 3 years. And they would not give us that, which was very telling, I think. So
I think they were the ones that, when I looked at the proposal and the premiums they were projecting, they had literally taken our rate sheet, like say our rate was $468, it was $468. And I was like, you didn't do any homework on this, you just copied and pasted it over so that I would say, oh, it's the same. That's just, that kind of stuff just makes me really question what they're doing. And I don't know that it was them, and it could have been another company, to be fair, but
and the local choice was designed, in my experience, it was designed to take out the roller coaster that people were experiencing with United and places like that. But that's all changed. The year I came to Fluvanna, Caroline County, which is right next to Middlesex, local choice gave them a 26% increase. School budgets can't absorb a 26% increase. You have to. You're gonna have to raise, you're gonna have to, visit that on your employees. So I think as we go through this process, it makes sense. Because we did have grave concerns with some of the accounting that was happening with PPA. But the administrative work. But I think as you get these bids, it's not as simple as just, let's go fishing and see who bites. That we really need to make sure we don't get into that cycle. This is my opinion. We need to make sure we don't get into that cycle and take care of the employees.
And one of the questions I get sometimes from employees is if we switch, am I gonna have an issue with a pre-existing condition? That doesn't exist anymore. That's not, that was taken care of with the Healthcare Act. So that is a concern I get sometimes, particularly with people with some pretty significant health concerns. That's not something that we're concerned about. So we will, our consultant, one of the nice things is that he has worked across the state for many years. And, he can tell us who does a good job of this, who do you not have problems with? And that can be helpful too.
Any questions about that or comments or feedback from you all on that whole process?
I'm just remarkably appreciative for the fact that we have such experts managing this. I'll bring it up. I'll probably beg for a 5-minute break after we get through the discussion on health insurance, just so we can reset. And so I can use the restroom, but one of the things I'm gonna bring up later is just how much work is being done and how much knowledge is institutionalized in 2 of our executive directors. And the fact that you're doing 3 full-time jobs, including running a health system for us. And I hope that you hit 100 years and you retire when you're happy, but if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, we're screwed.
I like to think I'll hit the lottery and not get hit by.
Great.
I
Perfect.
appreciate the thought.
You know what? I'm gonna choose optimism. That sounds fabulous. And so the sentiment is, we can't live without you. And you're doing too many jobs in some ways. And so one of the things that this board, whether it's, this literal board or whatever happens in January, needs to determine is I suspect that we need at least one more executive director and to shift some stuff and to make sure that knowledge is not lost as people make decisions for themselves or are happen to win the lottery. And so that's one of the things we're gonna need to think about budget wise is just making sure that we've got a deep bench and enough leaders for all of the roles, because I've never seen executives like you and Don have so much on their plates and to wear so many hats. So it's both a thank you and this is a symptom of unsustainability.
Yeah, I would agree. I had that on my list.
Oh, thank God.
To go road on.
Absolutely. What else on health insurance? Ms. Johnson, Mr. Key, Mr. Rittenhouse?
I'm glad you're moving away from BPA.
Thank you, Ms. Gillen. Relying on your experience.
I know more about health insurance than I want to. My goal is to know less.
I'm pretty sure you could retire and then go get a job running a health system or an insurance, either for a school division or a larger institution, and make way more money than you do here.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll look for that.
I mean,
agree that the change it does suck from before you got to get the new cards and
Right.
your prescriptions and your deductibles, trying to figure that stuff out. Because it never really works out in your favor.
And that is the other good thing. I'll advocate for self-insurance. So when you're self-insured, you decide, we're gonna do, the best life points that we do. We decide how we wanna do that, how many points, how we apply that, and we tell the provider, this is what we're doing. we make some decisions in turn, we made a decision a couple of years ago where people were going in for wellness checks and some of the blood work was covered and other of the blood work wasn't covered. And so we made a determination, no, if you're in for a well check, we want all the blood work covered. We have that flexibility when we're self-insured. When you're not self-insured, somebody else is making those decisions for you. And you're not able to just call them up and go, I don't agree with this. They go, well, this is how we do it. And so those are some of the things that you're kind of constrained with when that happens.
So our plan is on the 8th. What's the date, Sam?
Our next meeting is
Our
the
The
eighth.
next meeting is when we
Yeah.
hope to have.
We'll have some preliminary information and then
Presented to you.
I do think it makes sense to meet with you in smaller groups to go over more details, answer any specific questions you might have with Mr. Irby so that we can, so that when you come in December, you feel comfortable making a decision.
And is the December date, December 31 is when we need to notify, so we have enough time to take action at the December board meeting.
Yes,
Yes, but you do have to at the.
yeah.
Doing nothing means we will continue to do exactly what we're doing.
We continue with Jefferson Health. We are not under no obligation with the TPA. We can change the TPA.
Got it.
And my understanding is we could potentially change the TPA in January, which we may consider doing.
Gotcha. Anything else on health and? I'm not sure why that does that. It's 10:13 a.m. though. Any other questions as it relates to health insurance? Would the board mind a 5-minute recess?
That's fine.
Then we are adjourned for 5 minutes. back in session. So we've, just to recap, we've given some direction as it relates to salaries, so we have a better understanding of both comparisons and then also some options so that we can look at which job functions, if any, we'd like to prioritize increasing above whatever the state minimum is. We've talked about coach stipends and given some direction to Dr. Gretz to go ahead and shop and talk to parties involved so we can come up with an equitable and fair system that is also sustainable and predictable over time and also rewards tenure to the extent possible. 3, we've just talked about health insurance. We are out to bid. We will hear in the November meeting, but ultimately need to decide direction in the December. And so there'll be some offline, no more than 2 board members at a time to discuss that. For all of the new hotness, we also discussed the fact that we have 2 executive directors doing the job of at least 3, if not 5. And so some discussion around just acknowledging that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. The floor is still yours, Ms. Gillum, if you want to continue. I mean, I don't know if we were technically in 24 or 25, but all of this is part and parcel, so.
Right. So I just, a lot of these charts I redid for you to update them, and this is our experience chart as it stands right now. One thing I'll note is that it did appear to me that, that we didn't see a lot of movement out. There are people that, when I looked from like year 24 to year 25, it was the same number of people. And so I think at least at that top end of the scale, you're not seeing people leave as much. So definitely, some change is some good news there. We have gotten some feedback about the top of the scale when you're 35 plus. And I'll take another look at that when we do the salary study. I do know that some of the divisions we were comparing to capped at 30, and not 35. But I will go back and just analyze that so that we know what we're looking at. And then I have the number, that's just teachers that are there, anybody that's on that teacher scale.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge, just in case they're listening, that there's been a number of prominent community members who have spoken to me about the top end of the scale and like heard, we're discussing it now. We will continue to consider that.
Well, and I think one of the things, you know, there are people that got larger percent increases. But one of the things when we were looking at it last year was that the top of our scale was not really out of line compared to some of the other parts of the scale. But we'll look at it again and bring that information to you.
Yeah,
One of the things that divisions kind of vary on is what to do when somebody gets to the top of the scale. Give everybody a step increase. There is no step. So some people have a cost of living, or some people base it on whatever the social security cost of living was, or whatever it was. I just want to throw this out there, and it's just something to think about. And I don't know that we did this, but some divisions have in the past thought about how to design a scale to strategically incentivize people who've been in for a long time to retire and make room for new teachers to come in. And one of the ways some divisions have done that is to cap their scale. I'm not sure that and again, I don't know where the Flagetta did that. I have no idea why our scale is where it is. But I'm just not sure that in the current economy and the current market with teachers, that we are almost in a position to think opposite with that. And
right, to incentivize longer tenure.
people to stay.
Yeah, it's, we're fortunate, a lot of the vacancies that we have, you know, there are various areas where we're able to come up with alternate plans, but I mean, I know there's neighboring school divisions that have like 25 math vacancies. I mean, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, so there's the vacancies in general and competitiveness of the market, but there is something, you know, I want to be careful how I say this because the dynamic is certainly true. When I started in 1991 as a first year teacher, I I didn't have the skills and the chops, if you will, and I had been teaching for 10 years. And that's definitely true because of the shortage. The state has tried to reduce the barriers. And in some cases, it's still very difficult, but in many cases, it's a lot easier. The routes to licensure have been adjusted, and I think that's all fine. But the reality is, when you're brand new, you have a lot to learn. When you're brand new and you did not come up through a traditional teacher training program, you have even more to learn. And teaching is harder for a variety of reasons. And so I think all school divisions are seeing that dynamic play out in the classroom and in academic achievement rates and all that stuff. I'm oversimplifying all that. I'm not suggesting that people that are new or people that are career switchers are not great assets and wonderful teachers. But we'd be naive to say that somebody's brand new to this, and just walk in and do it the way somebody's been doing it for 30 years. And I think it really behooves us to think about how we want that to look for those veterans. That I'm not talking about somebody who's been doing it for 8 years and says, oh, I want to make $2,000 more, so I'm going here. I'm talking about somebody who could retire and chooses to hang in for a couple more years. Why would they do that? And how does this set up?
Well, the virtual environment is competitive as well. I mean, we have people that say like, well, I can go teach online and I can stay home and, you know, that and make as much or more money. And, you know, we always used to hear when I was coming through, you know, well, it's a global competitive job market. It really is now. So it's different than it used to be. But people really also thrive on face-to-face. I know I do. I prefer face-to-face in the meeting, not looking at a screen, but,
What do we think that the longest tenure we've had for a teacher, since teachers are the ones that are on this scale?
we have one at 48 right now.
We literally have one at 48 right now. Wow.
I'm lying, they're going to 49.
We had somebody from a neighboring division come in and do some work with us in our admin retreat. He was at 54.
So what I'd like to see is, as long as other board members are inclined, I'd like to see, as we work on proposals for scales, I'd like to see it extended to 50. Because one, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that those things should be done based on, and like we can negotiate, obviously, the lot of us as to like, does it need to go to 40, 45? If we have people now that are at 48, 49, and we expect, so we've got both inflation and life expectancy and other things, like we want to set ourselves and future boards up for success and for long-term thinking. And, right now, if you go from, 35 to 36 years, what would they have gotten last year? The average percentage?
I think they got the 7.
They would have
I have
gotten,
to go back and look, but I think,
I
So-
think Fluvanna has traditionally chosen to give whatever percent
yeah,
increase to everybody to the people at the top.
Mhm.
Not every division does that. Some give a cost of living of 1.3 or something.
Right, and so I don't want to see us do less than that, because I do want to retain talent. I want folks who have been teaching for a long time. The folks who are hitting those kinds of numbers, and I don't know the exact stat person, nor should we identify them, who's got 48 years, but that should be celebrated. There's a reason those individuals are still with us. Teaching is an absolute calling. You wouldn't do it otherwise. And I think that that our scale should be representative of that. We don't need to like break the bank, but if we saw these lines extend another some odd years, as I'm looking at the graph in the other document, but so I'd like to see maybe a proposal or the administration's best thoughts as to like how far we should extend it and what the right slope is. My thought is, as we continue to strive to eliminate NS and move more towards the line, then, you know, those last couple of years should be a continuation thereof. And we should fundamentally expect teachers to, as everyone is living longer and spending more time in the workforce, to do the same, and we should be prepared for that. I think that consideration is, once we do that, you know, as we look at this right here, one thing to note that I'm seeing in the data is that we lost a decent amount of people between 23 and 25. I mean, we went from 17 people down to like 7 or something, or 23, maybe that's apples to apples, but we lost a lot of people between year 23 and 24. There were spikes in the teens where we're losing people as well. So we're losing people mid-career and to some end late career, because that bar on 23 is 17 and the bar on 24 is 5. That's 12 people that left our division. With some, I'm looking at this one. Look at that big green bar. Oh wait, I need to compare the blue to the green. That's on me.
Yeah.
That is on me. I was just like, holy wow. Good, that remedies that consideration. But seeing, so we'll also want to know what it'll cost if we're going to re-implement scales above 35 years, then there may be some people who need to be moved up, in which case there will be costs associated. And apologies for misreading a graphic. That is atypical of me.
I know you love a chart.
I do. I get excited by the spike. You know, that's where your eyes are gonna go.
So we already talked about I had the 5% in here, but we now clarified that to 8 over the biennium. So I have that number that I'm running. And then I always have a slide of unknowns, and we don't know if they're gonna do additional revisions to the SAQ. So that's always something that we're just kind of pending with. I can use a placeholder of 10%, but honestly, I should have a pretty good idea of what that increase would be for health insurance. I'll just be honest with you, just looking at healthcare costs, I don't see any way that health insurance goes down regardless of what vendor we use. I mean, if you've been to the doctor and you've seen what they charge versus what gets paid under the contract, I don't see those numbers going down. But maybe things will be different. I don't know. Obviously, hopefully we get a state budget sooner than September in this biennium. That would be helpful. Enrollment is definitely going to be something that is going to be a factor. We saw a big spike in kindergarten this year. Those kids will go to first grade, and then what does the new kindergarten look like? It's really going to be an unknown for us, and we probably aren't really going to know that until the summer, to be honest. Because we were watching it all summer, but it just kind of kept ticking up all throughout the summer. We'll certainly encourage people to enroll early so that we can get a better idea of what that number is. The English language learner population continues to grow. We've grown to the point where we used to be part of a consortium for Title III funds from the federal government, and now we're on our own because we have a big enough population for that. But that may mean that we need to increase our English language learner teachers. So still continuing to look at that. The ESSER funding, a lot of that will be gone next year, but with the all-in funding, we're hoping to band-aid that so that we can get through for another year or two with those positions that we added under ESSER. And then what I don't have here that you alluded to earlier is I would really advocate for the board and of course with Dr. Gretz to talk about what the structure of admin looks like at the school board office. I do feel like, having been here 25 years, we've developed a process where a position was a position and the responsibilities were really based on the person's skill set. And so in some cases, there are people doing these duties that not necessarily a new person can walk in to do. So what does that look like? What would the ideal be, and kind of planning that out? I don't know if you want to say anything else about it.
I've talked to many of you just individually about that. I think we have to look comprehensively at the future, but also at the how we can best be structured to support some key areas. I've talked to you about personnel being one of them, construction being another. So I don't have anything concrete to bring you. I mean, I think it's really important. I also think it's a big item.
Yeah, I think one thing that could be helpful on this is, it would be interesting for you to provide what like the top end of a tree and a reporting structure looks like for divisions of similar size. Like, how do they do it? And that way we get a sense for what structures exist, what are the strengths and weaknesses comparatively? And like, how many executive director versus director level versus coordinators, basically coordinators up, like how is that structured elsewhere? And then what are our comparative deficits? So I think if we can do this, let's set the stage by figuring out what some surrounding divisions do. And then what are the areas that we think need to be alleviated and or shifted? Again, you know, I hate to talk about people when they're in the room, but or out in the case with Don in the moment, but like these two executive directors are doing work of many folks, and I know they have support staff, and I'm remarkably thankful for it, but it is wildly unsustainable, in my opinion. Are there other board members who would be interested to see what the leadership structure looks like in other divisions so we can have the discussion? It doesn't mean it has to be a priority per se.
We can certainly hear the information. It'd be very informative, you know, for everyone. And just like you said, just because we hear it doesn't mean we have to implement it.
Ms. Johnson, any thought?
My main concern is always people who interact with our students over people who interact with those who interact with our students.
Yeah, I respect and acknowledge it. You and I have talked about it over our 4 years together. I think that there is some push and pull that the more support we provide, the more or the less maybe that the teachers have to focus on, but I also acknowledge your concern. Mr. King.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the overall comprehensive structure of everything, talking about stipends. I think it's important to talk about administration as well. We want to make sure the school division can run smoothly as possible. And like you said, in case somebody in administration leaves, you know, it's going to be hard for that person to come in and pick up the pieces.
All right, and I'd like to maybe encourage, and I don't think we need board direction on this, but I'd like to encourage Dr. Gretz to make some recommendations after looking at the structures as to what you think is a must do. What you think is we're gonna need this in a couple of years versus a nice to have. So functionally tiering what you think is like, this is the best thing for the division in long term, and this is what I think we can deal with in order to get by. We always have to, as directors or administrators or any of that, do more with less. But I think if we have a sense of this is triage or this is treating symptoms and this is treating disease, I think that's a useful lens to think through.
Certainly.
Are there any things that aren't on my radar that need to be developed?
The one thing I'll mention is we do have a budget priority survey out in the community right now. We've gotten, I think, about 110 responses, which is better than last year at this time. It's only been out for 3 days, I think. you know, we do have thousands of parents and teachers, so I hope they'll weigh in. And we'll bring you some of that information as well.
I'm always interested in what we can do to equalize planning times.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, I'm gonna have a handful of issues, both new and things that we didn't get last year, but this is important. So what are some things we can do to, like, what are the alternatives as it relates to equalizing planning time? I assume you mean between the elementary and the
I
upper
don't
levels?
expect answers today.
Okay.
We put it out there lots of times and thought about it lots of times, and I don't want us to give up because I think it's important.
So I'm happy to add a second to that in order to encourage some thought from the administration if there are ways that we can
You talk about that as a part of our consideration, how the budget can support that.
is there a third member who would just encourage the administration to take time to think through that? Even just as a courtesy to Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Lovely. So we'll that's on my notes here as items to follow up on as we continue to talk through the budget. So I have a couple of things both that are new and things that we didn't fund last year to talk about, and you know, this is day number one in our budget journey together. And so like, there's a lot of things we're gonna talk through and think about, and then the list is gonna get narrower and narrower as we go. But scoping broad. My first question is, and I don't mean to identify individuals and staff, but it's a one job, one person function. But, you know, we last year hired a mental health coordinator. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Ms. Harlow Berner. And so my functional question is whether or not we have a sense from her and her experiences as to whether there are budgetary needs in order to support her charter and help our students on that function. I was remiss in not either emailing directly or asking Dr. Getz to email to figure out how those things are going and what additional resources we might need. But an absolute top priority for me is if there are things that we need in order to help our students as it relates to mental and behavioral health, I'm gonna put that above just about everything else. And so to the extent that we can get some professional insight from the people that we have in the building, that would be remarkably useful for me.
That we have discussed that a little bit, just what kind of budget we might put together, even just with regards to supplies. So we're happy to have that conversation. Another thing that we've been talking about is to put it on your radar. 2 years ago, we revitalized the partnership with K-Tech, the Career Tech Center in Albemarle. And I believe when we did that, we all had the anticipation that we would start it and it would grow. And it is growing. But the dynamic as it's growing is that the way our schedule at the high school and the schedule at K-Tech lines up, where certain classes are taught in the morning, certain in the afternoon, they don't have the staff to mix those up. We are going to end up with students who, in order to complete a program they began, and essentially what we're saying to students is we have this partnership with K-Tech. If you want to take, let's say, electricity or fire safety or whatever it is, we're going to offer this to you. And we're going to transport you. And so you go for the first year, and the second year, because of the way those schedules line up, there might be 7 kids total. Only one of whom is doing electricity. And because some kids start driving the next year, some don't. What I'm saying is you end up with the need to transport one child for one class. And that's just something we're discussing. I think, I'm not suggesting we should stop. That's part of our conversation, because you need to support that from a financial lens. And it's a significant investment for one child per week. And I think as it grows, you'll have less of that. And I'm probably describing what might be, I don't know if it's an anomaly, but it's probably not the norm. But again, when you have just a handful of kids in general, as it's growing, the second year, one started the first year, when they take the second year of building trades or whatever it is, two of them are driving, the one that can't drive needs a ride. And we can't really say to them, at least we are not right now saying to them, we're gonna transport you for the first year, but if there's not enough kids for the second year, you're on your own. And if you can't get a ride, then you just can't finish.
Could you loop back, whether it's November, December, can you provide us a kind of review of how many students are participating in K-Tech? What programs they are engaging in, if we have sufficient demand for some programs and not others, like, do we try to do any of this in-house to eliminate some of those considerations? Like, I don't think that we're at scale in any of that yet, but until we see from you guys how many we have doing what, we just won't know.
Sure. And the other issue, just to remind everybody, the whole reason we did that was, and we try very hard to make sure that we're not enrolling kids in things that we offer at the high school. There were, I think, 3 programs that we just don't have access to: the auto body, the fire safety. I don't think it's called fire safety, but the firefighter program, and the electricity. Well, building trades, of which electricity is part of.
Yeah, I think they have a separate electrical program and the building trees.
That's right. So that in and of itself, because we're saying we want to use our programs on site and offer students the ability to take these isolated classes we don't, you're gonna have a lower enrollment at.
Sure.
So,
And they admit our students based on where they have space. And so it's, I'd have to go back and pull data to determine what kids asked for that maybe they didn't get to.
Yeah, I think if we have a sense for, the working with K-Tech works for these things, and this is a program that we're getting up against like demand, and maybe it should be insourced instead of outsourced. Not that I want to like damage any relationship with K-Tech, we just want it to work where, if we have enough students for a class, maybe we think about what the capital investment is to make it happen.
and Louisa is building a brand new career and technical school. A pretty huge one. So there'll be opportunities for us to talk with them. They've already allowed us to send some students to the program that they have. Cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a virtual program.
To enroll. So lots of options. Just won't put it on your radar.
Another item I have is testing coordinator at the elementary level. You've heard me talk about this before, but we have some lovely STEAM labs and some amazing instructional technologists. And to the extent that we can find ways to shift responsibility and either hire a testing coordinator or find ways to do it without having those labs go dormant during testing times, like there is nothing worse. Well, there's plenty of things worse, but it is problematic if we have demand for young students who want to start learning STEAM things, and that there are curricula that our ITRTs could be implementing in those labs, but because of kind of dual hats and the way testing schedules work, for them not to be able to implement those. And if lifting or separating or severing the testing component from that role and responsibility means that we get more robust curriculum and or the labs are open more, I would be in favor of making whatever investment we need to, I mean, within reason to make that happen. And this isn't, this is just observation. This isn't staff leaning on anyone in any particular way. This is like, we have great STEAM labs. I hate seeing them empty. Like, that makes no sense to me. And so to the extent that it's practical to get more students in instead of, I think at some point I heard that they get 5 or 6 visits within I don't know if it's a half year, but it's not enough when these things are the building blocks to things like engineering and other programs. And, we talk a lot about career and technical education and about having skills at graduation, but it doesn't start in eighth or ninth grade. It starts at the elementary level. And if we expect our students to be able to compete, we need to make sure that our investments early are in alignment with that. So I'd like to know what it would cost to take that responsibility off the ITRTs and allow them to support students and teachers more directly.
That would do that.
There were a handful of items that were on our list last year, so I went back to the little grid from last year. This was in the, I think it was in the board docs for the day that we adopted the budget. For anybody who wants to look through that, it's the items in white towards the bottom, but the things that I saw that I believe were not funded last year and that we should at least talk about whether or not they're relevant and whether or not we want to consider them, where we had some consideration around bus aids. I don't know if the demand or need still exists for bus aids per se. Obviously, it didn't get at least three people who wanted to move it forward last time. So I don't have any new information or perspective on this. In fact, this is one that I just don't know enough. So I think Mr. Key might have been a proponent of it last year. I don't know if you're still a proponent.
Yeah, it's always important that, with the behavior issues with, certain buses that have identified, we can use additional bus aids. Because I know it's a hard job being a bus driver with, I don't even know how many kids, I don't even know how many people can fit on buses. Now, I know if some buses have 40, 60 kids, I think it's important to provide some additional staff if needed. Because how many bus aids do we currently have?
We only have bus aids on special ed buses.
They float, don't they? I think we have at least one floated.
Perhaps, but typically they're on buses where kids have mobility impairments and they need assistance getting off and on the bus.
So we currently don't have any support if we have a bus that needs additional support.
I thought we had one that floated, but we may not.
So to the extent that we can get information and or be communicating with Ms. Marsh and team as to true need and to talk about that in the broader context of our budget, that would be lovely. Dean of Students was on the list last year, so we talk a lot about behavior, which is just one component of what administrators do in the high school, but I'll note that we have how many APs in the high school? Is it 3?
Yes.
So
3 APs and a CTE coordinator.
3 APs and a CTE coordinator, and we got 5 grades. And traditionally, or at least what I saw coming up and what I've seen in other divisions is that there's generally an administrator per grade level. It seems as though we're a little light by comparison to others. So I don't know to what extent there is demand or interest in having further discussion about what a dean of students / additional administrator might look like for the high school.
That's a recurring theme in the current survey responses, and it was in last year's as well here.
So I think that's something that should at least be on our laundry list, not an unranked list of conversations, both in terms of, I think at some point as we look through the survey, and then obviously you're doing block parties and talking to staff, if we can kind of get a sense for like organic demand, high, medium, low, and then the associated costs, that'll help us kind of figure out what is urgent and not too expensive to invest in, what is, medium weight and expensive to invest in. And I think that's part of the calculus here is both urgency and expense. We had a coordinator for, I think it was a gifted program as well as social sciences, and there was something else on it.
Science, probably.
Was it science? And so that was something that was on the list last year, did not make final cuts, did not make it to the budget. So if we can get a sense for how in demand that role is, again, if it's a low demand, then like, I can't imagine it even being part of a second discussion thereafter, but. That was one. One that's important to me is, reading math specialists and coordinators. We got some, obviously we'll be figuring out, and Ms. Suarez and others will, be figuring out what can be funded by all in, what, ultimately how to use those, what does a tutor look like, et cetera, but. I think the board and even myself can use some education on, what our coordinator and age structure look like as it relates to reading and math specialists, so that we can make informed decisions about if we have enough specialists and aides. And so I'm using specialist coordinators and aides. Those may or may not even be, they'll write like terminology, but to the extent that like you could explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, that would probably help get perspective. And also, as we are looking at testing and gaps and all of those things, I certainly saw last meeting some real need as it relates to small group and or individualized attention. And so the fundamental question is, do we have what we need in the building to do that? And if not, can we make it work either through budget priorities and or through all-in funding?
I'll have to add,
Please.
if we're looking at so many positions that are not classroom positions, we also look at classroom ratios.
I think it is perfectly reasonable to look at the student to teacher ratios at our grade levels and how it compares to surrounding divisions. So to the extent that it is practicable to gather that.
Or rather than surrounding divisions, what's recommended by instructional specialists.
I mean, I think we will rarely adhere to any of the right ratios as it relates to any staff people. I mean, a school counselor is supposed to be 250 to 1. I can promise we don't have that many in the building. Psychologists have their own norms, so it is a useful data point. I will just admit that we fall far short of industry standards on a lot of positions, not just teachers. But super interesting to look at. And I know that we made ESSER investments to keep some of the K2 grades low. And I know that through attrition and other means that we won't, our existing recurring budget allotment will not allow for that to be indefinite. And so we'll need to make decisions as to what gets deprioritized or deprecated versus what ends up in a new recurring budget line. I imagine you're also interested, or Mr. Rittenhouse would also be interested in teacher ratios.
Yeah, it would be great, to lower the teacher ratios, but I don't think it's sustainable, not in Fluvanna County. But I would be interested in looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the teacher ratio, but, kind of get the teacher ratio that's sustainable for the teaching outcome.
Awesome. And we talked about institutional knowledge in the executive director roles and extending scales 35 plus. So I think that we've expended my laundry list that I jotted down when I sat at the table and looked through previous budgets. What else, board members, would you like to look at or talk about in subsequent budget sessions?
Can't think of anything else right now, James. You covered a lot, very needed stuff.
Ms. Johnson, anything additional
I
on
didn't
here?
bring anything more than I've already stated.
No, but of course, Mr. Key, anything for the moment? We scope broad and narrow like every other board does. I know this might be more comprehensive than is normal come our first budget session, but we did a lot of work last year to identify real needs. And so we start with a crib sheet that is our laundry list from last year and just reassess I'm sure there will be things that come up as we think through this. If any board member has additional items that they want homework on or want to invest staff time into to make sure that we bring it forward, then feel free to email me or the administration like directly. I just want to make sure that if you got something that's important to you, that we at least give it airtime and figure out what it would cost to do. And if you as we look through the survey for budget priorities, hopefully that'll help inform. Dr. Getz, it appears you're looking at open ends or verbatims as this thing fields. Is there something that we didn't talk about that seems to be popping up trend wise?
See, I can't say that at this point. We haven't been able to analyze all the responses, many of them have multiple comments.
Yeah. When do we expect,
Next time.
when do we expect when do we expect you to pull the data and share verbatims that are anonymized?
Well, we'll have it for you in November.
Sure, in November, okay. And so if there are staff either watching live or, in the future here, if you have particular needs or want the board to be aware of things or if need something to be heard, please put it in. And so, I'm committed to reading every single verbatim that is provided to me. I'm sure other board members will do the same. And so to the extent that it's 11:06 a.m. I don't even know why it does that, but to the extent that there are things that we're just unaware of or you want visibility to, please put them in and complete it so that we have a sense of what you all need in the buildings.
You do have a public hearing at your November board meeting for the budget.
Yeah, and also, in case anybody didn't hear it, we also have a public hearing as it relates to the budget in November. And so we'll have opportunities for members of the public, staff, residents, et cetera, to be heard then as well.
So just a couple other things. Anytime we have a new biennium, that means a new LCI and a new VRS rate. And it will probably be some time before we know what those two things look like. And then also the other thing I'll have to keep an eye on is fuel cost. We have a very favorable fuel contract right now, but obviously when you go to pumps, you can see that it's gone up in the last couple of months. So certainly something to keep in mind there.
Sorry, because I'm an idiot and I processed and then lost short-term memory. The new biennium is associated with what additional variables was it?
Local deposit index.
Yeah,
and
LCI
Virginia retirement rates.
and VRS. Yeah, I wrote VRS and then lost LCI. I think it was the acronym in my
Well,
brain.
we know even when they, tweak it up or down a couple of pennies, it makes a big difference.
And we will not have either of those things in November.
Yeah. We talk a lot about sales tax and other things. Any changes related to that of note of late? I know
No,
that
I mean,
things shifted.
we've definitely, the state has seen just, a great escalation in sales tax and the budget is still very healthy. Hard to say how they're gonna allocate funds. I do wish, as always, that when they gave us funds, it wasn't so prescriptive on what you had to spend them on and the percentages and all of that, because I do feel like it's not a one size fits all scenario.
I definitely agree with that. But that's nothing we haven't talked about. Oftentimes, those prescriptions are coming from people that have never been here. But Virginia does have a very healthy surplus.
Do we? And of course I waited until Miss Valentine left the room, but do we have reason to believe that we're gonna see significant increasing costs as it relates to special education and meeting our maintenance of effort and those things, just part and parcel?
We don't have an issue with maintenance of effort
Because costs are increasing, so we don't need to make up.
Yeah,
to the line.
and I will say, just looking at the population of students that are in early childhood special ed, we're gonna
Mhm.
see an increase in special ed students and also the needs of those students seems to be increasing.
That probably, I mean, I didn't bring this up because I don't have anything concrete to tell you, but that definitely, that trend is definitely there. An increase in referrals to the child find program. And we can't anticipate that that's likely to result in an increase in eligibility. But that also could potentially have an impact on Abrams Academy in the way it's staffed and the way we are using Abrams Academy. Both for like very traditional alternative setting education and also as a place for students who are being disciplined to continue their education. A lot more of those too. And at younger ages.
And there is there's obviously there's a prep meeting next Wednesday, I think in the morning. I forget I think it's Wednesday, which I will attend, but is there, I think I was traveling for work the last time they met. Do we have a sense of like what additional services prep might be able to offer that might offset some of our existing needs?
Prep is in weird, we'll say weird, but an ambiguous place with that because they're losing a facility.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're considering a bunch of other facilities. One of those would allow them to expand services for like day treatment. It's not ED. Sorry, I wasn't prepared.
No, I know, I just,
Day treatment services for
Mhm.
for certain students that all the divisions that are participating would desperately want to capitalize on.
things like autism, is that what you're talking about?
Not
No.
autism, they were serving that. This would be for Jim right here.
Yeah, this is on me for waiting for Miss Valentine to leave to do this.
The more difficult situations to manage in the traditional school setting with regards to behavior and that's the best I can do.
Okay. Nope, I think that's perfect. So we have another meeting next
Most
week.
places don't serve that population. So like Faison, places like that. So the ability to do that would be huge, but the places they're like 4 that they're looking at are at a high range in terms of price.
Mhm.
And so the price depends on division's ability to potentially increase what they're paying per seat. And then depending on where the location is, if it goes, for example, if it goes someplace close to Culpeper, Nelson may say it doesn't make sense for us anymore to be a part of that. It's too long of a drive. Well, then all that tuition goes away. Potentially somebody else could come in. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's hard to answer, but we're in the middle of that. We're actually the superintendents on that board or on that advisory committee are going to visit a facility in Nelson. That is one of the potential locations sometime in the next few days, I think.
Got it. Okay, well,
But the punchline is, Dr. Kelly, I do
Mhm.
think that could be that we're looking at a potential increase in the cost of a seat to continue to be a part. I just can't give you that.
okay, well, I'm gonna plug back in on prep, just meaning that it's fallen on days where I'm traveling for work, which just means that I have informational loss because I'm not at the table having the conversations. I also know that our leadership has to turn over because they have chair limits. I think it's 2 years, and I believe that our chair is up against a term limit, and so there'll be leadership changes on that board as well, but I'm gonna work hard to get caught up, read myself in, and then make sure that I am part of the process, especially if I continue to serve Paul Myra for another 4 years. So I want to make sure that if that we have informed and ample leadership and voice on prep. Anything else for today? I believe this is the last item on our like that this largely completes the mission of today, which is to take broad scope at what budget priorities might look like. What did we miss on your end or on our end? All right. So I guess then we're just on the school board member comments.
Have no further comment.
No comment.
I'm gonna weigh in on the bathroom, stuff at Central for a minute. 4 bathrooms being replaced, correct? The older ones
That's what's proposed right now.
at $125,000 a piece.
I think 80 to 90
Yeah,
was what we got from RMN.
$500, 500,000 was allowed for it, yeah. Okay, well. I went to those bathrooms, when I was in 7th grade and,
Uh-huh.
yeah, they're probably still in the same exact shape that they were then. But, yeah, they need to be replaced,
I think in all, the 500,000 that was in the CIP, I don't know how concrete that figure is.
yeah,
The 80 to 90 that I had anecdotally on my phone was from an architect that came out and did a review.
that sounds more realistic to me.
Neither of them we can take to the bank yet, but I'm saying that because it could be that certainly the project. You know better than anybody, if they get in there and there's plumbing problems or something, that could totally change the figure, but. It is likely it could be less than 500 if that's not the case. You
No.
agree with that?
Yeah, it would be less, I'm pretty sure. I know people in Charlottesville that could do that. They've done it for my father's company before over at Albemarle and Charlottesville, LA Lacy. But if you need a price, I'm sure they'd be glad to do it.
Yeah.
I want to just thank the Board of Supervisors for their historical support of the schools, especially last year's landmark budget and the way that we've invested in our students. I understand that, that was a considerable amount to provide last year. I think that the board is starting with due diligence and making sure that we understand what's urgent, what's needed long-term, what we can do without. And so, I take the early part of the budget season as seriously as we get into the wee hours, because the end product is only as good as your starting place. And so I hope that the public will come out and voice their needs or concerns as it relates to the budget during our next meeting, that staff and community members will take the survey and feel comfortable talking to board members and the administration about their vision or needs for the budget. And I am confident that we have a long season together. It's, October 19th, and we'll be at this frequently 2 or 3 times a month from here on out until it's all said and done. I'm hopeful that the state part of it will be a little bit shorter than it was last year. And I just appreciate the phenomenal amount of work that goes into the prepping the material for the next budget meeting. And, everything we mentioned, I'm sure, is some number of hours of labor associated with it. And a lot of it falls on Ms. Gillum to gather and put together. And so profound thanks, not only prepping for this one, but also for all of the to-dos that come out of it. Unless anyone else wants to say anything, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn the meeting today.
Now, second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.